Hello, my name is Jill Nitch, and this is my presentation for Module 3 of EDL 850. Question number 1. First, I interviewed 3 different people. I interviewed a former principal of mine, one of our current special ed teachers at Liberty Middle School, and then one of our current paras at the middle school. And question number 1, asking about what were the child find procedures. The administrator said you really need to rely heavily on your special ed teachers to know the laws and know regulations regarding special ed procedures of what testing to give and that sort of thing. Katrina, our special ed teacher, relies on the SIT team, student intervention team, where kids are brought up at first, and then if we feel that it's necessary from the SIT team, then they're referred for special ed, preschool early screenings, and then MTSS. And then Bailey, the para, really didn't have a whole lot of insight on what the child find procedures would be. What is their most challenging part of their role in special education? Michelle said that the meetings in general, they're well-deserved, but sometimes it just is a lot. Monitoring the laws and the regulations, and then schedules, making sure kids have the amount of special ed minutes that they need to have, and making sure there are enough paras to support those minutes. Katrina's response talked a lot about it's challenging when you have parents who are not choosing to be an active member in their child's education, and they get academic support at school, but when the child goes home, there's really not a whole lot of follow-through. Bailey being the para-educator, her take on it is probably a little bit different than everybody else's, and her most challenging part is when you get attached to that student and either see that student move up to high school, or when you see that student is mistreated either by a teacher or by a parent. What's the most rewarding part of your job? And it's really kind of funny because all of them, or at least Michelle and Katrina, kind of said the same thing: when you see your kids become successful and you see them grow. And you know you're doing the right thing when they're being successful and they're growing academically as well as personally. Bailey's answer was kind of the same. The most rewarding part is when you make a relationship with that kid and then your parent is willing to hand their education over to you. A lot of times you're with their kid more than they are. So sometimes it's hard for the parents to really relinquish control, but that's one of the most rewarding parts, is when the parents trust you to work with those kids. Advice on supervision of special education staff. Really kind of funny, didn't realize it until I was really putting all the answers in here, but all 3 of them hit on the same thing, that it's communication. Whether it's communication from the teacher to the special ed teacher, or the special ed teacher to the administrator, or the administrator to the special ed teacher, and communication with parents. You need to know what's going on in that child's life, and you need to know what their IEP says so that they are getting the most benefit out of that individualized program that they can. How do you effectively work with parents of special education teachers? First thing is building a relationship with them, getting to know those parents, because the parents are going to be more willing to trust you once you get to know them, versus just being that parent that calls them when their child does something wrong or you need to have an IEP meeting. That communication with those parents, positive, negative, just really hitting on the communication and building relationships. How do you effectively work with regular ed teachers with students with special needs? Again, it's communication. Again, you got to read what's on the IEP, and regular ed teachers need to know what's on the IEP so they follow it and they're giving that child every chance to be successful. And knowing, kind of like Bailey said, knowing what those special ed teachers are capable of. Sometimes special ed kids, sometimes those kids are able to do way more than the regular ed teacher thinks they can do. So again, it goes back to building relationships. You need to get to know those kids to know what they can do. Advice for a first-year administrator: learn everything you can about the special ed laws. Know everything you need to know about an IEP. Asking questions. Get to know the SPED teacher. Special ed administrator Katrina kind of put in there that don't treat the SPED teacher like they're a redheaded stepchild. Don't treat them like the person that you only go to when they're in trouble or when you need them. Get to know them on a personal level a little bit. And then get to know those kids too. It's could be saying hi to them in the hallway or giving them a high five whenever you see them. And then being open-minded to a different type of a schedule that those kids might be using. So being open-minded and keeping those lines of communication open and getting to know the kids and the special ed teachers. What's the role of the special education teacher and principal? It has to be a partnership. They have to work together. You need to have conversations about those kids. Constant conversations, everyday conversations. And then, again, just keeping an open mind, because that schedule that kid might be on or some of the things that the teacher and para are working on might be a little bit unorthodox or different. So you just need to have an open mind and kind of roll with it. And if it's going to benefit the kid, then they need to continue doing it. Characteristics of an aspiring administrator: flexibility, communication, being involved in the lives of the kids, willing to be involved in more than just IEP meetings, being cooperative with the students, being willing to learn more about those students. So again, it goes back to communication and building relationships. Reflection, evaluation, and projection. My reflection after the interviews was just really about how important it is to build relationships with students, especially special education students. I guess kind of skipping down to what I project about my future is I do need to learn more about the laws as far as special education goes, but I feel like I do a very good job building relationships with those kids, and I just need to be consistent with that once I am an administrator. After evaluating the answers, the 3 people did not know that they were who all was being interviewed, and every one of them hit numerous times on how important it is to communicate with everybody: parents, teachers, administrators, kids, and then how important it is to build relationships. Build relationships with those kids so they know that they're important and you're going to do whatever you can to make sure they are successful.